Paranormal Activity. What's it all about, eh? I mean, I'm not talking about the 2007 found footage film, I'm talking about genuine paranormal activity. And whether you're a true believer of the ghosts and ghouls that linger within the spirit realm, that's by the by, because horror cinema has got us well and truly covered when it comes to the things that go bump in the night. I mean, it goes without saying really, ghosts are one of the foremost archetypal vessels of horror, and because of that it's perhaps the first port of call for horror cinema. But don't let oversaturation water down the ectoplasm, because some ghosts are greater than others. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch. Today we curiously take a look at the top 5 scariest paranormal horror movies. Roll the clip. For the curious amongst you, of course, that clip was from James Wan's resounding supernatural horror, The Conjuring. And yeah, whilst that film in particular, in my opinion, is a modern classic when it comes to the supernatural goings-on of perturbed demonic spirits, and whilst Bathsheba irks more so on the fine line between ghosts and demons, it still has to be our most honourable of honourable mentions when it comes to terrifying paranormal horror. So yeah, there we have it guys, The Conjuring. It made it. Kind of. Kicking off at number 5, The Innkeepers, 2011.
Show yourself, spirit. I said show yourself, spirit!
And we've spoken about Ty West quite a lot over here at Top 5 Scary Videos, particularly with his 2009 film The House of the Devil, alongside 2011's You're Next, both of which are fantastic films in their own right. And if you haven't seen them, you should. The Innkeepers, which was also first released in 2011, whilst being a sharp departure from his usual subject matter, still manages to portray the vivid, tongue-in-cheek style of genre filmmaking that West is brilliant at. And whilst this film is genuinely funny throughout, and also oddly charming, there is no denying that The Innkeepers has a handful of absolutely terrifying scenes. And yeah, there is only a handful, but they're worth it, because the whole point of paranormal horror is to build up the tension and then deliver peaks and troughs, right? Well, I mean, you need to know the rules before you can break them. Written and directed by Ty West and starring Sarah Paxton and Pat Healy as Claire and Luke respectively, The Innkeepers tells the tale of two off-the-wall employees bored of their job at the Yankee Peddler Inn, which actually exists, an old and once grand New England hotel that is about to close its doors for the final time before resigning itself to history. During its final weeks, the hotel has dwindled to a ghost town, and both Claire and Luke are bored out of their minds. Luckily for them though, they're both frantic ghost hunting enthusiasts, and even more luckily, the Yankee Peddler Inn is considered to be one of the most haunted locations in New England, down to the ghostly hotel's history of Madeline O'Malley, a bride from the 1800s who was jilted at the altar and who supposedly killed herself at the Yankee Peddler. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. It's a self-contained movie, its plot is relatively straightforward, and it relies on some standout performances from Healy and Paxton to deliver the goods. But they do, they really do. And for an indie movie, the quality of acting in The Innkeepers is fantastic. Listen, this film doesn't exactly reinvent the paranormal wheel, but for a good old-fashioned ghost story told through the eyes of a fresh new lens, The Innkeepers is just a ticket. Swinging in at number 4, The Others, 2001. I love this film. In fact, The Others is probably up there as one of the most compelling ghost stories of recent times, because it is. And although its narrative is reminiscent of countless of its predecessors, 1961's The Innocents and 1980's The Changeling, just to name a few, the execution of The Others is so exquisite and beautifully bleak that we have to take note. We have to understand why The Others is a hallmark of horror, because what it manages to do is take the components of a classic ghost story and paste them impeccably, spreading them out like Ouija tiles at a seance. Written and directed by Alejandro Amenabar, it's possible to find many elements of Henry James's classic gothic horror novella, The Turn of the Screw, within its narrative, but it finds its way there in a frighteningly unique manner. The Others is slow, it's deliberate, it unwinds like the threads of a blanket, and it manages to be terrifying without delivering any gross outs or gore. Why? Because we care about the characters involved. Well, I mean, alright, the kids in this film are pretty annoying, but we care about Nicole Kidman's character Grace, and we care that she cares about her two young children, Anne and Nicholas. Why? Two reasons: they're afflicted by a rare disease, and their father Charles had been killed in action during World War II. Yeah, there's a lot to take in, but the investment is what gets us there, and it propels us through this film effortlessly. And then obviously we have to talk about the several genuinely terrifying scenes in this film. Again, peaks and troughs, the build-up of suspense, and then delivery. Nicole Kidman is fantastic in this film, as are the supporting cast of Finola Flanagan and Eric Sykes. I won't say anything else about the plot because if you haven't seen the others, you're really missing out. Go and give it a watch. Next up at number 3, Noroi, The Curse, 2005.
すいません、私小林。
If you're an avid watcher of Top 5 Scary videos, you'll appreciate the reverence that we have for this film in particular, because truth be told, although they're a numerous bunch, when it comes to paranormal, documentary-style, found footage horror, this one may well be the most terrifying, as well as being just a damn good horror movie from the off. That's if you've got a good 2 hours to invest in this movie, because for a horror, this one is long. But hey, good things take time, right? Now, if you have seen this film, it goes without saying, but Noroi is a film like no other, as is the hallmark of Japanese horror cinema. If you're looking for something entirely unique, Noroi is the film for you. Written and directed by Koji Shirashi, Noroi is a found footage horror presented as a documentary that follows the many trials and tribulations of Masafumi Kobayashi, a paranormal expert and also perhaps the most endearing and charming protagonist in the whole of horror cinema. Honestly, this guy is such a sweetheart. The film itself is told through several different lenses, mainly the many videotapes of Kobayashi as he investigates several paranormal occurrences in rural Japan. One of these projects, known as The Curse, just so happens to be Kobayashi's most disturbing documentary, and in classic fashion, has yet to be released to the public, given the fact that the paranormal expert disappeared whilst investigating it. And luckily for us, we get to witness just exactly what they captured on film. But don't worry, because there is no suspension of disbelief needed for this film, because by merely witnessing it, you'll understand the scope and horrifying length of its paranormal intent. Honestly, this film is terrifying, and if you understand the deep mythology and reverence that Japanese culture has for the spirits of the deceased, this film packs a punch. Not only is the horror paranormal in nature in Noroi, but there's a very human element to it, and that's also equally as terrifying. Coming in at number 2, The Devil's Backbone, 2001. Alright then, we're really sinking our teeth into things now, because when it comes to ghosts, our man Guillermo del Toro is near enough unrivaled in his field. If he were a scarecrow, you could say that he was outstanding in his field, but hey, this is a list about paranormal horror, and I'm not one for making light of that matter. No jokes here. If you know anything about the main man himself, you'll know his unrivaled skill at weaving in the rich tapestry of folklore and mythology into his unique blend of fantasy and horror. Before that though, he cut his teeth on the ghosts of the past and the spirits that lingered in the hallowed halls of history. The Devil's Backbone is a uniquely unsettling film. It is a blend of fantasy and horror that somehow manages to irk on social realism, while also being so detached from any form of the known that it's almost Lovecraftian in its scope. In Del Toro's world, his ghosts are ethereal. They're equal parts nightmare and equal parts holy revelation. They're something else entirely. Written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, The Devil's Backbone is the spiritual predecessor of his 2006 masterpiece Pan's Labyrinth, and thus it takes place in the late 1930s during the events of the Spanish Civil War, a theme that has underpinned a vast quantity of del Toro's work. It tells the tale of a young orphaned boy whose father died fighting Franco's fascists and who arrives in the care of 2 Republican loyalists that run an orphanage, taking in the many displaced children that have fallen victim to the war. I'll say no more, because this film is a must-see for any horror fan, and it's an experience best witnessed through unassuming eyes. When it comes to the paranormal, there's nothing quite like The Devil's Backbone, and turning around to see the ghost of Santi in the corridor, yeah, that's something else entirely. You've been warned. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Poltergeist, 1982. I mean, what did you expect? It has to be, right? It's Poltergeist. Not only is it the literal modern definition of the paranormal, it's also the progenitor of the ghostly goings-on of contemporary horror cinema. Until Poltergeist came along, we were resigned to the fact that ghosts only lingered in haunted old mansions out in the countryside, deep within the ancient family vaults of a line of bloody barons or some jilted debutantes. I mean, we had gothic horror to thank for that, for conjuring the spirits of the dead in a more contemporary fashion, but for the latter half of a century, ghosts would only ever beset themselves upon a very certain type of person. And then Poltergeist came along and thought, let's take that and put it in your house and your house and your house. goes for everyone. And it worked because there is perhaps no other paranormal horror movie that has been as influential as Poltergeist than Poltergeist. I mean, most people won't like to admit that, but it's the truth. After all, they're here. Written by the legendary Steven Spielberg and directed by the one and only Tobe Hooper, the pedigree behind Poltergeist shouldn't ever be understated, down to the fact that it is a genuinely terrifying horror movie. I mean, now yeah, I'll admit, it can appear a little bit dated, but back then, and on first viewing, holy moly, Poltergeist takes you by surprise, truly it does. And the majority of that is down to the fact that we weren't expecting a suburban ghost story quite on this level. And not only that, the strength of this film lies on tearing down that family unit. Each of the Freeling family experiences paranormal activity on their own personal level, to varying effects of genuine horror. Yeah, that's including face peeling and slipping into a pool full of skeletons. Real skeletons, may I add. In many ways, Poltergeist is a classic folk or fairy tale. It's eerie, it's hauntingly beautiful, it's a story about a young girl being kidnapped to another realm and her family uniting to save her. All it takes is a ghost coming out of the TV. Who knew? Well, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 scariest paranormal horror movies. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Disagree? Have any more to add to this list in particular? Then please let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as any choice picks of your own. Before we depart from today's video, if you'd like to continue on with your horror movie recommendation binge, then please take a look at our diligently compiled playlist, floating conveniently to the side. Diligently and conveniently. Sounds good to me. Unfortunately, on that note, that's all we've got time for in today's video. Just stick around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video or just top 5 scary videos in general, please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscriber. And I'm seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos. And until next time, you take it easy.